guys, today we're going to talk about 7 reasons why your hair transplant might fail. Hopefully in watching this, you will get a really nice checklist to go through to help prevent anything going wrong in your hair transplant, and it should definitely help lead you towards a successful hair transplant. Steve put these reasons together after doing how many thousands of consultations do you think you've done?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands of consultations with young men and women getting hair transplants, and I have a few things that I wanted to add when I was reading through these. So we're just going to run through them. This would be a great checklist for you of things to look out for and some things that will help lead to your success. The first reason that your hair transplant might fail is if you are too young and you're not taking finasteride. Eventually, there's a good chance you will run out of hair and leave spaces because your hair will start receding. So there are a few different options with this. You're not just stuck to one oral finasteride pill. There's topical finasteride now. We do have minoxidil, low-level laser therapy. There are some other things, but finasteride is still the most powerful one thing.
Yeah.
So doubling up at least on a couple of these is at a minimum.
One of the things I've learned early in my journey is that a hair transplant does not stop hair loss. It's in all of our genes when we have the great, wonderful, genetic hair gene that's called hair loss, that we want to do a hair transplant as soon as we can to fix what we think is wrong. There's nothing we can do to grow back our hair, so it must be that I need a hair transplant. And yeah, that's true, but it, again, must be managed properly. So now we have all these tools, and all the ones that David read, which I think are phenomenal. I didn't have those when I was really young and I lost my hair. So what you need to understand is, if you don't pay attention to those who can guide you and get you to stop your hair loss first, forget about growing anything back. Don't buy into anything that claims it's going to grow back your hair. The most important thing, since this is a progressive hair loss, is that you need to stop it. Once you've stopped it, and someone that's board certified and can make sure that that's the case through photography over about 6 months, now if you have good enough quality donor hair, you're a great candidate for a hair transplant, and then that's where people's lives are changed.
It really can't be stressed enough that preventative hair loss treatments are as important as anything. Everyone gets really excited about growing your hair back,
Exactly.
And there are things that can help with that process a little bit that you will probably see some noticeable result, like things like low-level laser therapy, finasteride, minoxidil, but none of those are going to give you the result of a hair transplant. Even exosomes, which is probably the most powerful of all of those that we've seen where before and after photos were like, wow. Still, it does not replace a hair transplant. But the combination of those things together, preventative plus proactive treatments, you can really have an incredible result these days.
Yeah, the best results based on your situation is one that is planned. You should already know the type of result you're going to get. I would consider it successful if you're on 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 preventative treatments. You've stopped your hair loss, and now you went to a qualified hair specialist that's going to hit a certain zone which really bothers you and do it in a way which looks undetectable, and you're back in business.
The second reason that your hair transplant can fail is if you choose the wrong procedure for you based on your age, your donor hair, how much hair needs to be removed. Choosing FUB or FUT at the wrong time can really be disastrous, even in the hands of a great surgeon.
We'll use some examples. You're very young, you're in your 20s, you have very thin, fine hair, and you're very bald. And you're not using preventative treatments and you choose FUE. Bad decision, okay? The FUE procedure is a procedure that's used for those that it applies. And who would tend to be a good quality candidate for FUE? Someone that's 45 years old, that has a genetic pattern through all family members, grandfathers, fathers, uncles, of not a lot of hair loss. They're using preventative treatments. They have very strong donor hair, and they have very little hair loss. Great procedure, FUE, because everybody wants to get a hair transplant, but not really get a hair transplant. That's kind of what FUE is. What I think is happening in the industry, which is an issue, is that for some reason it's still out there, that if this doesn't work and it fails, nothing grows, or you're not happy, oh well, at least I can shave my head and not have any scar. That's what I have a problem with.
I think I'm a great example when it comes to those choices of FUT versus FUE, and how I've sort of given myself extra shots in the bag or extra bullets in my gun when it comes to my hair. So I've already had 3 FUT hair transplant procedures, and now my hair looks pretty good. So, but at the same time, because I haven't, decimated my donor area, and I haven't used a lot of the hair here. I've still got lots of donor hair here. I've still got donor hair in the back. Because I've only taken from that one area of original, donor area. It kind of gives me that extra, thing that if at some point I start losing more hair, that I can go get another procedure. So it sort of just gives me like a backup. So that's one of the great advantages of FUT is versus FUE. When you're punching holes all over there, you can kind of only do that so many times before you're out, versus cutting the strip up, sewing it back together, and then you can always punch a little bit outside of that area if you needed to later in the future. The third reason your hair transplant might fail is if you choose quantity over quality, especially with a lot of overseas hair transplant clinics. They're promising thousands and thousands of grafts beyond what is really generally acceptable, and it's a quantity thing. Oh, but I can pay less money per graft if I go to X clinic. So less money per graft doesn't necessarily mean better result and cheaper. And a lot of times you have to weigh those two things together. It's much better that you get 90% growth and you're paying $2.50 per graft than you're paying 75%, 75 cents per graft and you get 50% growth. Besides even the cost, if you're doing the math, the other thing that comes down to is each one of those hairs is really valuable. You only have a limited amount of donor hair. And so once you've gotten rid of that, if you've killed it by punching holes and transecting the follicles, then that donor hair is gone forever. So I care more about keeping each graft healthy than how much per graft it was going to cost me. The number 4 reason why your hair transplant might fail is if you don't go to an established doctor. Now, there are a lot of hair transplant clinics popping up all over the world, and they find a doctor who can then do a hair transplant surgery. From my understanding, any doctor can actually do a hair transplant surgery, legally, right?
That's exactly right.
So anyone can instantly become a hair transplant surgeon. And let's say they even have a little bit of experience, 6 months, a year's worth of experience. The chances of your hair transplant failing in somebody that doesn't have years of experience is just higher. The other kind of scary thing to me as a patient is that I want to know who that doctor is and how they built their reputation over the course of many years. A lot of the clinics they build their reputation as a clinic, and sometimes that can be good, but then sometimes you really don't know who that doctor is. Right. So me personally, when I'm looking at a clinic, for any kind of surgery, I'm wanting to see kind of the doctor and that clinic building their reputation together, so that I know if something goes wrong, I can go back to that doctor and that clinic, and I know where they are, and I know their reputation, and we can have a conversation. One of the issues with inexpensive hair transplants is not the cost. The cost being inexpensive is fantastic, right? For us, the consumer, it's awesome. The problem is that many times those go wrong because the doctors all over the world that have spent many years building their reputations and training, most of those doctors are on the higher side. So no matter whether you're going to Thailand or the Philippines or Turkey or wherever, if you're really getting a doctor that spent many years building their reputation, I know doctors, surgeons, hair transplant surgeons, the top one in the Philippines and the top one in Thailand, and they're really not a lot cheaper than the ones in America, relatively. But you're saving like a few $1,000s. There's not like this guy will do it for $1,000 in Thailand and this guy in America will do the exact same transplant for $25,000. There's not this giant gap like that. And that's just because it takes many years to build that reputation, and those surgeons value their work and they stay very busy. The number 5 reason why your hair transplant might fail is if you choose a doctor that is just a part-time hair transplant surgeon.
Yeah, I mean, part-time, anything, right? Part-time ophthalmologist, part-time surgeon, doesn't sound good. We have a lot of companies now that are manufacturing different types of machines that they want to sell to do FUE hair transplants. It's rampant in the United States where doctors are being sales pitched every day these products, these machines, these devices. Oh, by the way, doc, you do hair transplants, you could become a hair transplant doctor. And a lot of them buy into it. And the companies come in with a marketing package and they teach these doctors how to sell hair transplants. These are the doctors that, might be great at doing breast augmentation. They may be fantastic about doing noses or other types of facial plastic surgery and be very artistic about it and be trained for years, but they know nothing about hair transplants. This same nurse that helped them close a wound in a breast augmentation on Monday is cutting up the tissue from a patient having a hair transplant on Thursday. Not the place that I want to go. Now, I'm sure that someone can find a doctor who's so overly experienced in surgery overall and who's very talented that can pick this up and probably do a decent hair transplant, but that's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, I had a guy write me the other day on Instagram, and he was going quite bald, and he was going to get a hair transplant. He was asking me my opinion, and the deal was that there was a doctor that had just bought a robot and was doing hair transplants as he needed some before and after pictures. And so he was going to do this guy's hair transplant for like super discounted. It was almost free in exchange for being one of his before and after pictures. And I totally understood that guy's wanting to go get the hair transplant done with his doctor because it was going to be very little money. But the issue is that it's a little bit of like playing Russian roulette with your head, because this guy was already quite bald. If that wasn't a great before and after result, he had now decimated his donor area and was just going to kind of be in a position where he had no choice but to like shave his head or get a hair system. So you're playing Russian roulette a little bit.
If someone's got an extra bottle of Botox and wants to use me as a guinea pig, I guess I would go for that because that's going to go away.
Yeah.
But when it comes to someone going in and extracting grafts out of the back of my head when I have a limited supply and I've got a large need because I'm a very bald person, you cannot look at the risk reward in that situation. You have to stay away from these part-time hair clinics. They're easy to pick out. The doctors know what they're doing, and a lot of them are shutting down, but be very careful no matter where you live, because this could get you in a bad situation.
The number 6 reason why your hair transplant might fail is if you believe everything on the internet. Now, the internet is a great place to research and to learn about cosmetic procedures, about everything. I've learned how to play guitar and sing virtually all off of YouTube. So I think that the internet's an awesome place, and you're watching us here. But the problem is believing just every comment that you read on the internet. As a bit of a public figure myself, and being out there and putting myself out there, I get to read a lot of comments. And it's actually pretty shocking the crazy things that people will say that they swear are true, but it just couldn't be more untrue. I once saw a comment about me on a video, and the guy said that I was wearing a hair system, and he knows I'm wearing a hair system because his uncle did my hair system. And I've never worn a hair system in my life. And so, if I was going to read this guy's comment, I would go, oh, of course, he has first-hand information. His uncle did this guy's hair system. I read a comment yesterday on my YouTube channel, and a guy was commenting saying that I sleep with like transvestites and that he had video of that, which I've never have, and so he definitely doesn't have video. But again, this is just like an out-and-out bogus lie. People will just literally write anything on comments. So be really careful what you're reading on like comments, and try and get information from credible sources. There are a lot of great credible sources, but you can kind of learn those, I think, by seeing people that have like a long history. So if you see something in a YouTube comment, don't go by that. Even there was a comment on the exosomes, and the FDA issued a warning about exosomes. And so I saw some people commenting about that. I went and read the warning, and the warning was about a particular clinic that was selling exosomes in the wrong way and using them in a way that the FDA didn't approve of, but it had nothing to do with Dr. McGrath, who did my surgery and is now using exosomes and is totally, the FDA is totally fine with what they're doing and actually, from what I understand, really appreciates what they're doing. So things can be kind of misinterpreted in pretty crazy ways sometimes. So find people that have a long-lasting reputation and try and listen a little bit more to them, and then fact check your sources. The last thing that you might want to look out for, number 7, is hair transplant brokers. So I understand this a bit, but not as well as Steve. So Steve, would you explain exactly what a hair transplant broker is?
The internet is loaded with a lot of information. Hair transplants is pretty popular now. It's the #1 cosmetic procedure for men, hands down, for about the last 10 years, thanks to all the increased technology and the better doctors and whatnot. The warning that I have for you today is you be very careful on what is out there in regards to advertising that's making a business look like a doctor's business, when really it's just like the old days of stockbrokering. So what happens is that these business people, they buy pay-per-click marketing based on different keywords, and they make deals. Well, they don't even have a doctor yet, but they've got a facility in a given city. Let's just say New York City. So they lease a space for a week, and then they start to buy a lot of pay-per-click campaign AdWords, and they load up all these questions and answers and patients and put them all, saying that the entire month is sold out except a couple days in the 3rd week of April. So you're going to get a great deal. You come in, and once they've got 3 patients a day, 5 patients a day, not a bad week, maybe even work on a Saturday if they need to, they find a doctor who's willing to take a certain percentage, all under the name or the cover of the business. So you have to be very careful, because they can hide the owner of the domain name. The way it works is that when we're vulnerable, when we're emotional, when we're upset, and we stumble upon a pretty good website that uses a bunch of before and afters, they look really good. It's very alarming that there's no specific doctor, or there may be one doctor, but he's just signing off on it, but that's not the doctor that's going to work on you. So to me, this is a red flag in regards to how you can end up being in a place where there's 4 or 5 surgeries. There's a doctor that doesn't even know the nurses he's working with.
Yeah.
And to me, that's something that could end up in a bad hair transplant.
We would love to hear your stories. If you have a hair transplant and you have something to add, it really adds a lot to these videos. Getting your questions and comments and hearing your stories, it gives us more fuel, more questions that we can answer. So leave a comment and let us know your story, and thank you so much for watching.